And I have the great pleasure of introducing Annika Sorteberg. She is the niece to John Sorteberg, who's sitting here right next to her, and Chris Kennedy. So thank you, and come on up, Annika.
Perfect, thank you. So today, Ellie Mark and Noelle Fay from Know the Truth, which is the prevention program of Minnesota Adult and Teen Challenge, will be presenting to us. Noelle is the youth prevention advocate, and she provides prevention education through evidence-informed curriculum and a peer-to-peer approach. She presents in school health classrooms across Minnesota, both virtually and in person. Noelle shares her personal experience and consequences that came from youth substance use in an effort to change students' attitudes. She graduated from Minnesota Adult and Teen Challenge's long-term program in June of 2020. Ellie is the prevention education manager, and she uses her education and the information students provide to know the truth to keep their prevention efforts relevant, credible, and relatable to all audiences. The majority of Ellie's efforts are focused on educating parents, community members, and other professionals on the substance use trends Know the Truth is finding in the schools. Please help me welcome Ellie and Noelle.
Good morning, everyone. All right, thank you again so much for having us. I am Ellie Mark, the Prevention Education Manager with the Know the Truth Prevention Program, but I'll be talking a little bit more about Minnesota Adult and Teen Challenge as a whole when going through this presentation today. Darla, unfortunately, was unable to attend as her family has come down with COVID, so please keep them in your thoughts. But I will do my best to do her presentation justice as well. So Minnesota Adult and Teen Challenge has been working within Minnesota for the past 30 years to help those who are suffering from addictions to substance use as well as from mental health disorders to gain freedom from all of these life-controlling addictions and issues. And they have been doing so effectively, starting in just a condemned house. And now they have branched out to 5 different locations, 12 different campuses across the state, and all of these providing our full continuum of care. It starts with that prevention program, as I mentioned, but I'll be going into that a lot more in detail. So I'm going to skip over that and jump to our teen program. This is called Lakeside Academy. It's located in Buffalo, Minnesota, and it's a behavior and recovery center for teen boys that focuses on developing those cognitive skills that are required in order to succeed. A lot of these, oops. Oh, you're good. I was like, oh no, I don't know how to work the remote. So with that, with the teen center, excuse me, we are focusing, like I said, on those cognitive skills in order to succeed in life, because a lot of these young men suffer from antisocial behavior disorders, and being able to build them back up from the inside out and give them a solid community foundation where they can attend school, but then have that special one-on-one care that they need in a beautiful setting in Buffalo, Minnesota, is found to be incredibly successful in setting them up for a successful life. We do also offer our short-term license treatment program. That's anywhere from a couple weeks to a couple months. And when people come to us and say, I don't really know where to start, someone I love is experiencing a substance use issue, or maybe it's themselves saying, I want to go somewhere, but I don't know what to do, this is where we are going to send them. It's inpatient or outpatient. And like I said, it is licensed. Minnesota Adult and Teen Challenge, though, we are known more so for our long-term recovery residential program. This is where the faith-based aspect is introduced, and we see that long-term change. A lot of times people who come into our short-term license treatment program will transition into the long-term recovery program. But once they are done with that, we don't just say, congrats, you're done, you're graduated, see ya. We understand that we need to provide that continuing care to ensure that sustained success in the rest of their life, whether that's leadership training, job opportunities. In fact, the majority of people that I work with are graduates of our program, which I find to be incredibly inspirational. And with that too, we offer that transitional housing. But let's go back to prevention. And what's prevention? We're hearing it a lot in terms of COVID-19, preventing the spread of communicable diseases. Well, we can also prevent chronic diseases as well, such as mental illness, such as substance use disorders. Not in every case, but in many. And prevention, what that looks like here within Minnesota Adult and Teen Challenge is our Know the Truth program. It's been around for 15 years now, and we are the largest prevention program for substance use within the state. And with that, we are secular. Though we are part of Minnesota Adult and Teen Challenge, we are spending a lot of times in public schools, and we understand that we are reaching students that are outside the Christian faith. And so we keep that part out of it unless it is invited. Every single year, we are reaching over 200 schools, over 60,000 students through our presentations and through our social media platforms, as well as our 24/7 anonymous text hotline that I will touch on as well. We are managed by certified prevention professionals and people who have gone through substance use issues themselves, which you will hear from today, also known as our youth prevention advocates, who go in and share their stories with students. Last but not least, when we are in the schools, we are not just a one and done program. We also offer our full continuum of services as well if they are wanted. We have our presentations, those evidence-based presentations about substance use, but we go beyond and we're able to offer youth peer support services from people who have gone through substance use themselves and are able to lead other youth through that challenging time in their life. We have been in Edina High School since 2008. It's one of our longer partnerships, and we are also in Valley View Middle School since 2011. So we have been here in your community for quite some time, and we're excited to continue that partnership. Even though right now it's virtual and in person, and we're trying to figure that out, we're still able to connect with students. There are some concerning statistics when it comes to what we are seeing within any school district, and I wanted to bring your attention to some of the things that we have found within Edina High School. Now, when we survey students, we survey them right after our presentation is given. It is completely anonymous and it is completely optional. In Edina High School in the 2019-2020 school year, just under 40% of students have reported using nicotine. So that's the addictive chemical found in tobacco products. The more concerning statistic that we've been hearing about a lot in the news is e-cigarettes and vaping. We are seeing that almost 100%, 95% of the students that do use nicotine in Edina High School are using it through an e-cigarette and vaping device. It's not the traditional cigarette, not traditional chew. It's now these high-tech devices. We also have just under 50% of students reporting drinking alcohol. That is higher than the state average, as well as higher than the state average with 34% of students using some form of marijuana. When we talk about what presentations look like within the classroom to address some of those statistics, we use that peer-to-peer education. We're not just counting on the teachers to come in and talk about don't do drugs. We know that messaging doesn't work anymore. What they need to hear is from someone like Noelle, who will be sharing her story, saying, here is what happened to me. This is what the real life consequences look like. And that is where we see the incredible impact that we are able to have. The first thing we talk about is our goals and privileges. We talk about that your goals, getting to vote, getting to travel outside of the country, getting to go to college on a scholarship or play in sports, they're not rights, they're earned, they're privileges. And just like they are earned, they can be taken away as well from the choices that students are making today. Of course, I don't usually say it to them in that serious of a tone. It comes out a lot more lighthearted. We talk about buying PS5s or being able to drive on their own. And what we are doing by doing that is giving them a reason not to use. We're giving them a reason to say no without explicitly saying, how can you say no to drugs? We're letting them come up with it on their own, which is a lot more effective. Then we talk about trending substances and the myths and facts. You can kind of see some of those on your screen here, how we share that. We start by talking about things like a good example is vaping devices. They hear that vapes are safe, but then we talk about how nicotine is a highly addictive chemical that primes your brain for further addiction in life, and how it can really, again, the choices that you make now can impact your future, impact those goals. So you're starting to see it kind of all come together. But we go beyond the truth myths, facts, all of that. And we bring in those personal stories. And that's where we see the real change, where students start to go, I can see myself in that person. I can see myself potentially making that choice. And I can see myself suffering from those real life consequences. And our trained advocates do an exceptional job. Every time I hear them speak, I have chills or I cry, one or the other. And at the end, we have our question and answer session. We do this through an anonymous text hotline. So students text in their questions, and that can be in person or virtual, and we can answer them over Zoom or we can text them back. And we don't know where the students are coming from. We don't know their names. We don't know their ages. They just come to us and ask questions that they may have been afraid to ask in person or ask of their teacher due to shame or confusion or anything along those lines. So I talked a lot about the impact of the personal stories, and I am grateful here today to have our youth prevention advocate, Noelle Fay, to share hers. So Noelle, if you'd like to come on up.
Good morning, guys. Sometimes I can be soft-spoken, so if you can't hear me, just do this. Okay. Okay, so the version of my story that I'm going to tell you is the one that we give to the teenagers who I speak to. So my story doesn't, most people like to start their story off right where the drug use started, but I just like to start off before where it began. And that was at birth. I was actually born in prison. My mother was incarcerated for drug use and abuse, and my father was abusing drugs as well. And because of that, I was placed in foster care system at 4 days old. I stayed in foster care until I was about 5. And at 5, I was adopted. But even as a little 5-year-old girl, about that big, I was wondering why no one wanted me. So that was a struggle that at 5, I didn't understand, but I was lost and confused, even though I had gotten adopted into a family. The family that I was adopted into had really good intentions, but unfortunately with generational trauma, the struggle came with knowing how to take care of a child the proper way. So the family was very abusive, physically, emotionally, and there was some sexual abuse. And I really struggled as a young girl to understand. So I developed these core beliefs that I wasn't good enough, that I didn't matter, that no one wanted me. And these core beliefs stuck with me through my entire life. I still struggle with those things sometimes. So as I got older, I do want to point out, because of those beliefs, I often was a daydreamer. You know, I found a place to escape. I wanted to be a Disney princess. I just knew that one day my family, who I really didn't know at the time, they would come and rescue me. I imagined I was royalty and they just couldn't find me. I often dreamed about flying away. And that's something that I still go through, not as extensive as that, but I do often have a vivid imagination in fantasy land. So with that, when I was about 15, that was my first time getting introduced to marijuana. So it wasn't something that I went looking for. A friend of mine had it and she's like, hey, I have this, let's try it. Now in high school, we didn't have a prevention program. We didn't have people to teach us about drugs and alcohol or even a health program. I grew up in an inner city in Detroit, Michigan. So there wasn't a lot of interest in that. So when she told me that, I didn't know anything about it. So I said, sure, why not? Sounds fun. And I did. But unfortunately, what I didn't realize, and looking back now that I see, is once I tried that, I realized that it was a good coping mechanism, that escaping became my coping mechanism to deal with life. And I started a pattern that stayed consistent for a long time. So it wasn't just the marijuana, it wasn't just smoking weed, it was the distraction, it was numbing the emotions, it was just going through the day and trying to protect myself mentally and emotionally. So with that, I also had some other coping mechanisms that weren't healthy. And one of them being my books. I was a really avid Harry Potter fan, but some of the more dangerous coping mechanisms were running away from home. which I did continuously, but my mother was a part of law enforcement and worked for the state of Michigan for over 30 years. So I wouldn't be able to stay gone long. Yeah, she found me everywhere I went. I don't know. It was, yeah. So the other thing was, by up to this point, I did not recognize it at the time, but I now realize that I had undiagnosed mental health disorders. So in school, on the outside, I looked like your typical straight A teenager. You know, I did really well, very well educated. I went to one of the top high schools in Detroit. I participated in every activity that I could. I wasn't a sports fan, but I did do symphony orchestra. I did do choir, and I did really well in those things. On the outside, I looked like I had everything together, the best of everything material-wise, but inside, I was deteriorating mentally. I was just becoming worse and worse, struggling with PTSD, anxiety, major depressive disorder. And later I found out I was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. So by the time I was 18, I was pretty much done, you know? So my coping mechanism, along with the core beliefs that were set in me, with those things, I decided to join the military. So why not? You know, I went into the Navy and, you know, I moved about 1,000 miles away. You know, I figured that if I did that, the people that hurt me would never be able to hurt me again. That was exactly my thought. But what I didn't realize is that I was taking myself with me. And by this point, I had all these things ingrained in my brain that that's how I operated. So when I ran into struggle in the military with family, because I got married at 18 and I had a child at 19, I did not know how to handle those things. So what I did was walk away. It first started with alcohol. I'd stopped smoking marijuana. And in the Navy, it is true what they say about sailors. We drink, we work hard, we play hard. So by 18, I was fully functioning alcoholic. And even overseas, that's what we did. Morning, noon, and night. If we weren't working, we were drinking. And it became a habit for me. And then it started becoming an addiction to where I needed it to go to work, to go home, to deal with the problems I had at home in order to communicate with people or to get rid of the feelings that I was having that I didn't really understand at the time. So I ended up being in the military for about 3.5 years, and I ran into a conflict and I ran into some minor military trouble, you know, where I was on restriction for like 60 days. And instead of asking for help, what I did was I walked away because that's the pattern I established. So when I walked away, unfortunately, when you're discharged from the military with an other than honorable discharge, you are not given the same benefits. So at that point, some of my consequences were I was no longer able to use my GI Bill that I paid for. I did not get the proper transition into civilian life. And I also struggled with just basic life skills that I was never taught, like communication, like boundaries, the ability to say no. Those things weren't ingrained in me. So I ended up making some decisions about my life that I never thought that I would ever make. I was one of those kids where I would be listening to a speaker like myself or thinking about my mother and my father who my biological family who weren't successful and saying, I will never do those things. I will never be that person. That could never happen to me. And I did every single one of those things. And so with that shame, excuse me, with that shame and that guilt and that resentment towards my family and the bitterness I felt, the unforgiveness, everything that I had built up inside of me, I began using deeper drugs, like harder drugs. So it started off with cocaine, and then it went to MDMA, which was Molly or ecstasy, and I tried hallucinogens. I tried pills once. I ended up in prison for the one time I tried Xanax, because it didn't work right with my body. I didn't know. So that was pretty much how my life went from the age of 23 to 28. So 5 years I was homeless. I lost custody of my son. My husband was incarcerated for 9 years at the time. We'd already split up, but you know, that was his father My son ended up going to a facility as well. So now you have a whole family incarcerated, and he is 12 years old. And those kind of things like just bring me down. It just brought me down even further. And I became extremely reckless with my life to the point where I didn't care whether I lived or died. I was not suicidal, but I didn't care. It just, what's the point? So I, about 4.5 years ago, I always struggle with this because it is a local thing that happened. About 4.5 years ago, I ended up coming to Minnesota. And when I got here, I was here for all of 3 weeks. And I lost my job because I was drinking and I forgot to call in the next day and tell them that I wasn't coming in. No call, no show, you're fired. So I walked away from that too, after living in maybe 15 different cities in 5 different states. I just had enough. So I was quitting again. And I was driving someone else's car at the time, and I was going from Elk River to Wilmar. It was about a 2.5 hour drive, 2 hours to 2.5 hours. And 11 o'clock at night, I fell asleep. I remember waking up and jumping too, but I didn't pull over because it was in the middle of nowhere and I thought I could do it, thought I could handle it. So from 1 minute to the next, I fell asleep going 60 miles an hour and I blew through a stop sign. And the timing was so unfortunate because there was a family coming through the intersection and I crashed into their car, T-boned their car, and all of them ended up in the hospital and the mother died on impact. So there were 2 kids in the car, and this is one of the reasons why I do this job. There were 2 kids in the car, 3 and 7, and they will never get to see their mother. So all of those things that I said I would never do, and then on top of it, hurting someone so extensively, I can never pay back. I can never bring the mother back. What would I do for those kids? So I sat on my depression for a while, and because I was charged with criminal vehicular homicide, I ended up going to prison 4 months, or to jail 4 months later, and I was sentenced to 51 months at Shakopee. While I was there, like the first year was really hard, but after a while I had to ask myself, how did I get to this point? At what point did I see that it was okay to live like this? What I realized is that I didn't know the right way. I never asked for help. I never tried to seek out help. And so with a lot of encouragement from some of the staff around me at the time in Shakopee, and also the encouragement of a program that I was in, I began seeking help. And it was in Shakopee, it was as simple as maintaining my mental health. And what that looked like was me getting a mental health therapist that I talked to every week, maybe getting medication therapy for all of those undiagnosed problems that I was having, and taking basic classes, like core classes, learning about my core beliefs, learning how to say no, learning what boundaries were and that I could have boundaries, learning about the things that I did and why I react the way that I act. So many of those things are what helped me to decide that when I got out of prison, I wanted to go to Teen Challenge. So I was in prison for about 3 years, and the day that I was released, I decided to go to Teen Challenge because prison doesn't do digging in, it just does maintenance work. And I knew that I needed more from life. So, and I also just wanted to have the relationship that brought hope into everyone's life. I had seen so many people be happy in the midst of their circumstances that this became my number one goal, was to forgive myself and to learn how to be happy in the midst of the things that will continue to go on. So with Teen Challenge, I was able to really dig into those traumatic experiences, to begin to talk about them. A lot of stuff came to the surface, and I had a community of people that loved me. I walked in and they wanted to hug me. I hadn't had a hug in 3 years because of the no touch policy. I was able to, people knew my name, not by number. They saw me and they wanted to know me as a person. And so I spent a year getting loved on, and I'd never been loved in that way before. So the growth that I had from Teen Challenge was, I'm a completely different person, not because I'm not addicted or chose to stop using drugs, but because someone else showed me love when I needed it and showed me compassion and said, it's okay to be you, Noelle. It's okay that you have these problems. So right now, what I'm doing is working for Know the Truth as an intern or advocate. And also I work in a sober home. I'm the manager at the sober home, and I'm recently started, or in this next week, I'm starting to work for Minnesota Indian Women's Resource Center as a residential advocate. I also have a few other things coming up for me. And all of this is due to the fact that the people that I've been surrounded with at Teen Challenge, they've helped me to thrive and to embrace the gifts that I do have. So you guys are hearing just a tiny bit of a different version, because I want you to understand, like, that even though there was extreme circumstances, that the healing I received at Teen Challenge is what changed my life. So thank you so much for listening to me today. Yes, ma'am. Okay. Sure. Okay.
There's a little bit left that I'll go over, but then if you, yeah, so, Noel, if you want to come over here and I can wrap things up and then. So as you can see, just how impactful the stories that our advocates share, the students that hear them can relate to the things that Noelle was talking about feeling put together on the outside, but hurting inside. And one thing that we found this summer through a survey that we conducted through Know the Truth, another anonymous survey, is that 46% of students across the state of Minnesota, with everything that's happening between COVID, between the societal unrest, between everything that's happening in politics, are struggling with their mental health, not necessarily diagnosed with a mental illness, but are currently struggling with their mental health. And we also know that 6 in 10 people who struggle with a substance use disorder also struggle with a mental health disorder. So taking care of that mental health and providing that support to students, to adults, to everyone is incredibly crucial. And when I'm talking about relating to the students in those common factors of dreaming they were a princess or wanting to escape or having those big goals, Noelle didn't talk about this, but she wanted to go to culinary school. And I just think that is so cool, because I think you are going to get to do that someday. But with that, they can relate to that. And it's so much better than me coming up here and saying, drugs are bad, kids, don't do them. We are found to be 3 times more effective than that standard health curriculum alone at changing those attitudes towards substances. And after our presentation, the majority of students commit to not using substances after hearing these stories, which is a significantly higher number than the amount of students who said they weren't going to use after the presentation before the presentation. And we continue to see that as time continues on. So what does that look like right now in the midst of the pandemic, in the midst of everything that we are facing? We have 3 different options, and we have our virtual, hybrid, and in-person options. We have in-person presentations still, following the social distancing, wearing the masks, but our most popular options are through Zoom, whether it be a live presentation or sending a link to a pre-recorded video that students can watch. This is Micah. He was one of our past advocates and lead presenters who shares his story and has a great impact as well and really relates to the students. We also still offer our support groups that we have for students, as well as community forums, which are similar to events like this presentation today, but I go into a little bit more depth about the trending substances so that people feel more equipped to talk about them with other people. The most important thing is that we are meeting students where they are at. We're talking with them, not to them, as one of our other advocates says, and I think that is so incredibly powerful. In the last year with Know the Truth, we have reached over 60,000 students. In Minnesota Adult and Teen Challenge in 2019, reached over 3,100 people and brought them to freedom, brought them to the place where Noelle is at, where she is a productive and incredible citizen with our society who has hopes and goals and dreams that she is achieving every day. Getting emotional. So how can you get involved? That's a question that we usually hear at the end of this. There are a lot of opportunities, and I wish Darla was here to talk even more about them, because there are more than that are even on this slide. We have volunteering and mentorships, which look different right now in terms of COVID, as well as business sponsorships, recovery coaches. Those are people who have come out of addiction and are now trained to help others do the same. Know the Truth, it's in your schools currently, but we are always looking to reach more and more students every single year, which is more possible now than ever thanks to technology. We have opportunities to sponsor local schools. If you want more services or more presentations within them, our program is completely run on donations and grants. And so that is a lot of the times sponsoring local schools. Cars for Recovery, if you have a car you're no longer using that you find it in your heart to give to our vehicle donation program, financial gifts and adopting a room. I realize now that the Hope Awakens luncheon was a while ago, so I don't know how that didn't get updated, but we're having events constantly. And places that you can find more information include our websites. One of the best services that we offer, Know the Truth, as our anonymous text hotline, but with Teen Challenge, you're able to just call 612-FREEDOM and get any information that you need. And then Darla's email is there as well if you have any interest in the donations or the volunteering and mentorship opportunities. And then my full email is there as well. For our information. So we thank you for supporting us here today and welcoming us here. And with that, I will turn it over for questions. So Noelle, I'll kind of come stand next to you. There's a question, yes.
With COVID, there's a lot of anecdotal evidence that mental health issues, substance abuse issues. Have you found that with Teen Challenge that's going up, or?
Yes, so the evidence is showing that, like past pandemics and other issues in terms of like societal unrest that we are experiencing, there is an increase in overdose. That's kind of where we get our main numbers in terms of being able to decide if things are really increasing or decreasing. We do know that it is substance use is increasing in youth, and at least if nothing else, their perception of other people using is increasing. I say perception, and I'm pointing this out purposefully because if other people, especially when you're young, if you think other people are using, you are going to be more likely to use yourself. If I know my mom drinks a glass of wine to calm down at night, then I'm going to think it's okay to drink a glass of wine and calm down at night. So when we're talking about these things, it's important to talk to youth about it. And in terms of intake or anything along those lines, there have been, unfortunately, a little bit of a dip in our intake, and that is mostly due to fears of contracting COVID. So there are a lot more people to reach now more than ever. But unfortunately, we're not seeing the people come in that we would like to. So does that answer your question? Okay, thank you. Yeah, not a problem. I feel like we should play the Jeopardy music. Honor Alex Trebek a little bit. Dun, dun, dun.
Any
Great.
questions coming in from anybody on Zoom this morning?
Great. Well, we'll be around if you have more questions afterwards too. So thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Annika. Thank you for coming and introducing these two. And Elle, thank you for hopping in for Darla. We appreciate that. You did a fantastic job. You're fantastic. And Noelle, I am just stunned. Your story is amazing. And I'm so grateful that you found your way towards a different path and towards the light and just continue on. And, someday when you're a chef somewhere, let us know. We love to come taste your cuisine. What's your favorite meal to make, Noelle? What is it? Chicken Alfredo. From scratch. Okay. Wonderful.